Welcome to the first episode of Past.Present.Future. I'm Griffin, your host, and thanks for stopping by. This is a new comics recommendation / discussion podcast where I sit down with a guest and we talk about our favorite books from the past, the present, and the future. We get to share what we love with each other and you at home. Joining me for this episode is my good friend Nicole.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole. I like pizza, literature, and horror.
Those are all great things. You collect action figures?
I do.
I didn't know that. What's your favorite action figure you have?
Oh.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
I do have a really cool Juggernaut.
Ooh.
I won him from Wade's, actually. I also have an autographed Boba Fett. It's still in, its original casing.
Autographed by Boba Fett.
Yeah.
That's pretty fucking cool.
Yep. So, I have a ton, and unfortunately, they're not out because we have 2 cats and live in a shoebox. So
I don't know if you can see my set, but literally all of my belongings are in boxes behind me, except for this intimidating man. So I feel you.
But yeah, so it's autographed by Jeremy Bulloch, and it's kind of priceless to me. But I recently went to, I think, Connecticut, and I bought some Sandman action figures.
Whoa.
Who are in this box. When the plastic gets yellow, so it hasn't been loved or seen or touched for years.
Someone's been smoking around it, totally.
Exactly. So, I have a lot. I can't put them out yet. Yeah.
Space, what a thing. Just holy hell, is it good to be back talking comics on YouTube? Can I just get that out of the way? And the thing that I like most about this new show is getting to not only discuss our current picks as they're coming out, but that it's like an excuse to dust off some old favorites and revisit them while maybe getting to put some folks onto them for the first time. So, Nicole, I wanted to ask you, what old tome from yesteryear lives in your heart?
So I was going to pick something by Neil Gaiman, but I decided to choose Johnny the Homicidal Maniac because that's what I'm feeling today, by Jonan Vasquez. Jonan Vasquez is the creator, the writer, and the artist for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. The art is erratic. As is the writing sometimes. Like sometimes you have to turn the book entirely around and spiral it so you can like read the words that are happening. But it's like the embodiment of what goes on inside the head of someone who is tired of society and the world, and it's just extremely visceral. If trigger warning, like this is a hardcore comic. It's not for, it's not a superhero. It's not gumdrops and rainbows. It's pretty intense.
What age range would you suggest it for?
Definitely adults. This isn't for children. I wouldn't suggest it for children. However, there is Invader Zim, so that's kind of like a cushion to prepare you for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Okay.
Kind of in the same vein, destroy all humans. So it's the characters and the dialogue is hilarious. But it can get quite dark. But it's actually emotionally deep at times. It's like reach inside to the darkest depths of your soul, and there's Johnny. And there are some spin-offs, and like I said, he's the genius behind Invader Zim. And he's all around fantastic. It's like when you read Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, you're like, what is going on inside this man's head? And it's the same thing that's going on inside every person who works in customer service.
I know that feeling.
So yeah, so I highly suggest JTHM to people who are ready to branch out into a darker comic.
Would you say this is like a horror? So I haven't read this actually.
It's not horror,
it's
but
not a horror comic, but it is dark.
It's sadist.
Okay.
Yeah, it's black and white, all of it, but it's gory.
Okay.
But in a cartoony way.
So it's like that over the top kind of like gore and violence for the sake of gore and violence, as
torture. It's all of that, but in a funny way. It's in a funny. It's done tongue in cheek. It's funny.
I can appreciate something taken to excess for comedic value, for the humor and hyperbole. What do you think made this stick with you the way it has? Why does it have this lasting impression on you?
Because I've never read a comic that was hilarious, but at the same time, like, I just want to kill everyone, because like we all go through, life like that. I'm going to kill this person. And what Jonan Vasquez does is he plays on that. It's a play on being human, and like, what is inside? What are the voices inside you, telling you to do that you cannot do? So he indulges us. That's what he does. And for me, I had never read anything like that, and it was just, I don't know, it was wild when I read it. It's a wild book. It's a wild ride.
People have been trying to get me to read this, and this is not an exaggeration, since I want to say I was in late middle school. And I really should get around to it. The art, you said, was black and white, but the paneling kind of does like interesting layouts, and
it does
non-standard blocking.
It takes a bunch of turns. It's just it's like I say, you have to spin it around, and it just like, it's erratic. It's erratic. And sometimes there will be pages that have little to do with what's happening. There will be like advertisements for things,
Really, like, kind of capturing that like train of thought, kind of scattershot sanity.
The book is also, it's like obey, consume type of thing. It's like that. That's cool. It's very human, and very it looks at like how disturbing society is.
I think it's funny that you picked like, maybe not a horror book, but a book that borders on horror and its dark themes, because the past book that I want to talk about to our dear listeners today is Colder, which I lent you.
That was a good one. I liked the villain in that.
So this is from Dark Horse, circa 2013, and it's by Paul Tobin with art from Juan Ferreira. Colder is a 3-volume horror series about Declan Thomas, his caretaker Reese Talbot, and the question, does madness come from a place, and if so, what kind of creatures live there? After an early brush with such a creature during an asylum fire, Declan begins to grow colder. His temperature plummets, but he's able to step into and affect, even cure, others' madness. Through 3 volumes, Ferreira creates memorable, haunting, weird bastions of body horror for the protagonist to square off against. And it's this aspect, the incredible monster designs and page art from Ferreira, that really elevate this book. The thing that makes this stand out in my mind overall is that like Declan's story is fine. It's competent, and I really enjoy the concept of insanity as this tangible force or entity, it's that personification of an abstract into a physical manifestation as a way to deal with things we grapple with mentally and then overcome them. And that works for me. but it's certainly not a thoughtful or progressive look at mental health. And as someone who fights battles with the brain pretty regularly, sometimes it's nice to just put a face on a concept and then watch that concept lose. Uh, but the story really takes second chair to the absolutely incredible art, world design, and color choices from Ferreira. This is a book you need to hold and read, even as the monsters on the panel do their best to unsettle you. Like you were saying about the villain, the first villain, Nimble Jack, feels
Nimble Jack.
jokery. He's a force of chaos without clear, rational goals, existing to cause and feed off insanity. Then you get Swivel, who is this finger-themed nightmare, goes around slicing off and planting the digits of his victims. And the landscape of madness itself is bleak, desaturated, and looming. Even the one-off terrors are vividly realized, tentacles and too many eyes and disconcerting proportions. Ferreira snapped on this book, and I think any fan of body horror, great monster design, and brevity, because this is a series you can really read in a sitting, should check this out.
What other, do you know any other books that he's written?
You know, I really should, but I don't.
I'm gonna look into that because, like you said, the body horror aspect, and you also said the story was fine, and the story was fine. However, it was the artwork and it was the villains that drew me into the story, especially Nimble Jack. Like hardcore, I was like drawn to him and his character. But yeah, the story.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying about like Nimble Jack. I really like the way that Ferreira kind of moves him through the panels.
Yes.
And like this kind of flowy, dancey thing going on where he's just prancing through, ruining people's lives.
I read his voice. I told you this, like him from Powerpuff Girls.
Powerpuff Girls. You did tell me that. That makes it so much better.
I'm telling you, it worked for me. But it was I thought it was just beautiful. And
it's such a good book to look at.
And the concept was interesting. It was like putting a face on the mental health issues that ail us, you know?
Oftentimes in mental health related situations, you can feel really powerless because you're fighting this intangibility. It's not a real physical thing that you have to overcome. And I like that idea, playing with the personification of a concept and then using that as a way to kind of like win on something that you can't always beat. And that's kind of the part of it that stuck with me. The romance stuff between Declan and Reese really didn't work for me in that book.
It didn't work for me
it's
either.
shoehorned in super hard. It's definitely not a perfect book, but it's I think overlooked a lot when we talk about some of the better body horror from like the mid 2010 era. In keeping with our theme, there's no time like the present. What are you thinking currently, Nicole?
Homesick Pilots, written by Dan Waters, artist Casper Wingard. Waters is tied to a ton of great titles, including Lucifer and The Dreaming. He seems to be a big fan of Neil Gaiman, and so am I. So this title is beautiful. I love horror. I love supernatural themed comics, books, movies. And this one grabbed me immediately. It's a ghost story, haunted house. The art is gorgeous. The coloring is gorgeous.
So good.
It's just, hold on. And like it's like this inside the book. I don't want to like show too much, but it's gorgeous. So it's clever, it's funny, it drops a bunch of band names, little jabs at self-appointed punk police, which I freaking love, Edgar.
Love you, bud.
Love you, Edgar. But at its core, it's about loss, grief, pain, isolation, being afflicted by the human condition. The tragic elements that drive fascinating writers to write magnificent stories. There's a line that's mentioned a couple of times in the comic that stuck with me. And when I read it, I was like, okay, I see what's happening. Um, and she says there are corridors between us. And like I said, sure, you could totally read this comic for, face value, or you can peel away the onions of the comic, which they all have, and you can delve deeper into the meaning of it. And what that meant to me was, there are things that we don't know each other, and everyone is the struggles someone else is enduring. So when I read or when I watch something, I need to peel it away. I can enjoy it at face value. I totally can, and sometimes I probably should. So I don't have to think too much. But this one is really getting to me, big time. It's you know it's deep. It's got deep meaning. I
Uh,
like comics and books with deep meanings.
we talked a little bit about this before we started filming, which was probably a mistake. Uh, and yeah, the more there is to peel away in a book, the more rereadability it has, the more I want to experience,
Yes.
and I can get nuances and meanings and thoughts I missed the first time, or connect new dots, or think about things with new frame of references, and it can change my interpretation. And that's what I love the most in storytelling, I think, is that uh we're creatures trying to express our own world through fiction and our own understanding of that world. And
Well, it's
it's
told in these magnificent ways, and
yeah.
it's just it kind of helps you along, and it's almost it's very cathartic and therapeutic to read these things. And like that line, that's going to stick with me forever. There are corridors between us. That's like, oh
that
my, it has such hardcore meaning.
that line in particular too, and when we're talking about layers, right? That line so perfectly encapsulates one of the framing points of this book, which is that 90s punk isolation, that kind of
Yes,
coming of age in the early
punk's
90s, and
dead.
feeling lost in that coming of age time right at the end of high school. And that line works in conjunction with the house, it works with Amy, and it works with the themes of the book in a way
Right.
that's so fucking cool.
And it's like how you just fucking said that. It's like, so I didn't fucking pick up on that until you just said it. And that's the beauty of it. It's like putting it all together and just like that aha moment, like, holy shit, that is what's happening. It's like a whole fucking metaphor. I didn't know
Yeah,
we could curse on this show, so I feel a lot
I
better.
might edit them out. I don't know how YouTube works. We're gonna find out, Nicole. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about real quick on this too is Dan Waters is a very dense, narratively confusing sometimes writer, and this is his most accessible piece of comics that I've read.
Interesting.
But he still manages to do the kind of things that we're talking about with
Right.
an accessible like, if you told me that we were going to have a conversation about the layers to a book that is part Power Rangers, part The Shining, and part a punk rock 90s send up, like, I wouldn't believe you. That's ridiculous. But comics does that, and
But
that's
it
why I
works.
love it so much. Have you read Coffin Bound? That's another one by Dan.
I haven't, but I was reading up on it when I was taking notes. Um, but
I'll kick you.
I'm ready to read that.
I'll pass that to you when you pass Homesick
Yeah,
Pilots
that
back.
sounds right up my alley too.
Coffin Bound is fast and a little disconnected, but deep and so well approached in its concept. And the art's like mind-blowingly good. This isn't even the book we're supposed to be talking about. Sorry, I'm totally. I needed to read that one, I think, 2 times before I realized how incredible it really was. I think the first time I was a little lost in the symbols and the imagery that was being conjured, and its kind of fast and loose relationship with reality. And then the second time I was able to really pick up with what they were going for, and it's so cool.
I like books like that.
And then the last thing I want, just we touched briefly on Caspar Wingard's art, but I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about what drew you to it. I know that we talked a little bit about palette again in the pre.
It had a lot to do with palette, but also the story of I don't know what Ami's backstory is. Ami is sort of the main character. You know, they're orphans. But I want to know why she's an orphan. There's some mention of her mom. I need to know what happened. And it starts off like that. Like they go to a show and then she's in this haunted house and it takes her and now she's like on this like mission. And I'm like so into it. I'm like so into it, but I'm not just into it for like the story. It's like also her inner dialogue. The inner dialogue that's written for her is just it's intense for me, you know, and I can identify with a lot of the things that she's, you know, talking to herself about, you know.
Yeah, I found the way that it kind of handles that adolescent angst and discontent really earnest and honest. I didn't like it. Doesn't feel forced. It doesn't seem like the writer is playing off of like after school special stereotypes,
Right.
and like it feels like either a lived or a well researched experience. And I would say that everyone involved in this comic has at least a little bit understanding of the punk rock and the horror things they're setting up here.
There's this one part in the book where one of the dudes goes to a show and he's like, I don't even fucking like music. And and he's like, I fucking listen to punk because it sucks. And they can't even get that right.
That's that's the scene where a Buzz is talking to that dude under the bridge, right? That stuck with me too. There's so many great like seminal scenes, and a lot of them work as sort of parallels to different like coming of age movies that precede it. Some 80s, some early 90s stuff. Just a great book. I'm sorry I think I probably spent too much time on this one too.
No,
but I did love that too. I'm going to try and talk about this next comic without crying, and keeping it brief is going to be a challenge because The Many Deaths of Laila Starr is the best book of the year, in my opinion. So the next book is The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. It's from Boom Studios, and it's by Ram V, and Felipe Andrade is doing the art. This 5-issue limited series sees Death become unemployed and made mortal, where her fate becomes entwined with the baby who cost her job, as he will grow up to invent immortality.
Oh, shit.
The narrative framings, issue to issue, are genius, balancing metaphor and symbolism with history and an ebbing cynicism that gives way to an incredible ending that genuinely made me feel profoundly at peace. If you told me a cigarette would make me cry before I read this, I wouldn't have even understood how that could come to pass. Ram's writing is perfect here. It's poetic, it's touching, it's clever, and it's funny. Each issue feels like it could be a self-contained fable, but the way they all work to further his philosophical take on the relationship between life and death is career-defining, in my opinion. And Andrade brings every bit as much to the table, with an incredible sunset palette to the Mumbai cityscapes and characters that are expressive and fully realized in such a unique visual style. The look of this book heightens the feel of its magical realism, which in turn allows the narrative to flourish the way that it does. Every panel feels impactful, each page feels important and alive in a way that so few books are actually able to capture. I'm not exaggerating when I say that every issue made me cry in an earned and honest way. There's no cheap or easy emotional manipulation here, just a brilliantly paced musing on the meaning of mortality and life. I recommend this to everyone. You should read
Griffin,
this, nameless
that was
current viewer.
beautiful, Griffin. That was
Uh,
beautiful. You absolutely sold me. I definitely have to read this.
uh,
Oh my god.
it's it's mind-blowingly good. Like, my words don't do it justice. It touched me in so many different ways. I really am going to cry. Um, I don't want to get into the personal stuff, but life's been weird. Stuff's been rough. Death has been very present recently, and this book helped me cope with that in a way that I didn't expect it to. So check out The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. Some fantastic cover work.
Well, now I'm gonna cry.
Sorry, bud. Book's really
Saga.
fucking good. Book's really fucking good, dude.
I gotta read it. I'm like
I sold.
apprehensive to read it.
It's not crushingly sad. It's just real. It's just such an honest look at what life means and why it's so important to live it.
And I think, you know, so sure, novels can do that. However, when you read a comic book, it's like sometimes you have to wait, you know, and you're so invested in some of these characters, and you have to wait to see where their story is going. And I think, and I go into this a little bit on my, my next entry. And it's, you start to love these characters, you know,
Yeah, they're your friends.
and, I'm not going to go into, the Sandman. I was going to choose that, but I decided to give it to a friend because I love her. And she deserves it. But like the Sandman, it's like you're going through all of these things with all of these characters, and it's sure it's it's not real, but the themes are real. The feelings are very real. And I think that's what comics do for us, you know.
There's something in the synthesis of a collaborative medium, which novels
Yes.
typically aren't, where you have the two different minds coming together to create from nothing worlds, and that's
Yes,
incredible.
exactly.
Uh,
You
I
see it
it's
from their
and
point of
it's
view.
thanks to some of these Substack subscriptions, I've been able to get a more full understanding of the kind of dialogue back and forth that creates these scenes. One of the ones I subscribe to Hickman, and he's breaking down comic panels as they're coming out, basically. And he's showing the emails between him and the artist and how they get from the point of what he thinks to what comes to the page and how it comes to life, and the way that ideas bounce back and forth and grow and become something different but better.
That's dope.
So fucking cool.
That's dope.
You talk about how important character is, and one of the interesting things about this book is that the characters are important and they feel real, but it's not the characters that keep you coming back. It's, I think, wanting a deeper understanding. I think you want to see obviously where the surface level story goes, but you feel each issue this greater kind of thought on the topics that are being addressed, and it's approached so creatively. There's an issue where the narration is through the eyes of the last Chinese temple standing in Mumbai. And there's one that's through the eyes of a death crow. And there's one that I referenced before that's through the literal lens of a cigarette. The cigarette narrates the comic and it makes you cry. but these are such inventive and creative ways to tie the culture of the city to easily identifiable and relatable universal kind of thoughts. It's just done so fucking well. Oh, really like this book.
So I see that you have those all racked up. Does that mean they're not? I don't want to borrow those.
I don't lend out floppies.
No.
That's my rule. The collected edition comes out in January, from what I understand, and I'm going to be buying it, at least 10 copies, because everyone I know is getting it. Speaking of the future, Nicole, what comic are you looking forward to down the line?
Saga Volume 10.
Who isn't?
Oh my gosh. So artwork done by Fiona Staples, written by Brian Vaughan, and Brian Vaughan should be a household name for those who love to read. I was actually introduced to him by Jamie.
Oh wow.
I was like waiting for her to like do something, and she was like, "Here, read this," and gave me the first volume of Runaways. So that's how I was introduced to Brian Vaughan. But this comic, this story, is filled with current nuances happening in the world with a fantastical flair. So I just want to say that Prince Robot the Fourth is one of my hands down favorite characters in any comic, movie, book, anywhere. Like the characters are extremely complex, and you should not get attached to any of them. That's not a spoiler. I'm just telling you. It's just like what somebody says if you're about to watch Game of Thrones. Don't get attached to anybody. But this series, it does not pull any punches, and does not care about your emotional investments. When I started reading this, I wanted to kick myself because I couldn't understand why I waited so long to read it. I was actually pretty pissed off at myself, but once I started reading it, it just had the feeling of basically shit that happens every day. It's just shit that happens every day, and it's done with like different creatures from different planets with different beliefs. I mean, there is this one part in the book where they land on this planet, and there's this little chicken lady, and she's like, "Welcome to Abortion Town."
I love Abortion Town.
And I was like, this is just like the best series I've like ever read. It is one of my favorites. I've been waiting years.
Almost 3 years since the hiatus. It has been almost 3 years.
So I mean, but I'm hoping that once it comes out again, they're just gonna smack us in the face with a whole bunch of issues. That'll be cool. But it's definitely one of my favorite series ever. I mean, it gets to the heart of you. There are real losses that you go through. Like I was saying before, like the emotional investments in these characters in these comics, they just feel so much more. I'm not knocking novels. I love novels, but it just feels so much more authentic because I don't know how to explain myself. I don't know how to articulate this in a way that will do my feelings justice. But like the way that I have attached myself to these characters, like this comic makes me cry. This series makes me cry.
Often.
Because it's just like you have to you identify with so much, but also it's the things that are happening are basically happening. Lots of injustices, lots of pricks running around with lots of stupid beliefs, shit like that.
The entire and the characters, like you said, are just so vibrant and alive, and Brian does such a good job giving them each a unique feel and voice, and it's such a
Yeah.
big cast of characters. That's such an achievement. Did you hear what Brian said this January?
Yes.
We got official confirmation scripts are being worked on, so we
I see the things that are written, but I never trust anything that I read ever.
I I need this to come back. I'm with you. This is actually this series, for people who don't know the history of it, this series really launched the Image era, the early, like, this is 2012, I think it came out, and that kickstarted this creator owned like third wave Image boom that we're still feeling some of the residual echo out. There's been ebbs and flows since, but so many great series got launched in the wake of Saga. It also is what brought me back to a comic store for the first time in a while when it first came out.
I think I'm gonna go ahead and say the same thing. I gotta be honest.
It does a lot of great stuff.
I go through these things. Remember when you and I had that conversation? I'm like, I can't read novels anymore. I can only read comics. And then I went through this stage where like I couldn't read comics and I can only read novels. And now I am juggling all of them. Okay. It's just like I found that like that sweet spot where I'm so invested in reading right now. I just want all of the books.
I love I love stories, and that's like what draws me. That's why I love TV. That's why I'm just a fan of good stories with interesting takes on things. And anything that tries an experimental approach intrigues me. Anything that has its own feel and personality intrigues me. But the difference, like what you were saying before, the differences between comics and novels just kind of underlines there are certain stories that can only be told in comics.
Yeah.
And Alan Moore kind of famously intended Watchmen to be this unfilmable kind of like, this is a story you can only tell in comics. You can only tell this with the way that sequential art works, and the way that we have the history of these books, and we can play with that and those archetypes in a way that we can't in the greater like zeitgeist of culture. And likewise, there are stories that lend themselves to TV more and novels more, but it's really refreshing. And talking about all these books has kind of reminded me, like, all of the great stories that are comic stories that don't need to be adapted. They don't need to be given a life. That's not what their intention is. They're intended to be sequential art on a page that you read and that you put down and then you pick back up and you read again.
Like Preacher.
Like Preacher. To close out the book of the future that I want to talk about real quick is it's actually coming out in November, and it's called What's the Furthest Place from Here? It's coming out on Image, and it's by Matthew Rosenberg with art from Tyler Boss. I do want to make a quick aside here that when I went to both of my regular comic shops and tried to order this, the response to can I get Image Comics, What's the Furthest Place from Here, was what? And I think like they just thought I was asking them a question, like how I could leave. But once we got over that hump, I was able to secure my own copies. I haven't seen much of the specifics on this book yet, but it's described as a post-apocalyptic coming-of-age story, which by itself catches my attention. But I'm also a fan of past youth transitory stories from Rosenberg, like Four Kids Walk Into a Bank and the underrated We Can Never Go Home. Tyler worked on both of these too. He did the art on Four Kids and the colors on We Can Never Go Home. Rosenberg has a punk sensibility packed with self-aware angst that mixes well with his irreverent humor and a penchant for engaging premises. But why am I excited for this outside of past works? Well, issue 1 is a triple-sized issue, and there's a deluxe version, which is going to come with an exclusive 7-inch record. The first issue is featuring a song by punk rock legend Blake Schwarzenberg. from Jawbreaker and Jets to Brazil.
Dope.
And the other side is a Joyce Manor single. So 2 songs exclusively available with this comic book. Super excited. Altogether sounds like a can't miss book. Stellar creative team working at their best. I am very pumped. This was a lot of fun. I don't really know how to end a show. I guess I just want to thank anyone who is checking this out. Go support your local comic book stores. Support creators that make the things you love. Special thanks to Ray Ray Beats for the theme music. Make sure to check it out on Spotify. Like and subscribe. Ring the bell. Talk to us in the comments. If you check any of these books out, let us know your takes. Nicole, thanks again for doing this inaugural episode.
Thank you for having me.
It was a genuine pleasure. I've had a great time.
This was a dope conversation.
I hope people enjoy it at home. Do you have anything you want to plug or anything to say in closing real quick?
Well,
or not real quick.
You can totally follow me on Instagram. That's fine. I post a lot in my stories because people complain that I post too much on the timeline. But also I wanted to plug my friend who makes amazing macrame. I'm sure she can make you whatever you want. She does these cool things that hold potted plants and little mason jars. It's all very cool. She's making me a BTS macrame banner.
Army. That's so
Army.
Cool.
But you can follow her on Instagram at Small Batch by Rena, and also she just started an Etsy shop with the same name, Small Batch by Rena.
Shout out to Rena. Support her if you're interested in those things. I have seen some of the ways that she has those hanging plants and jars and stuff, and I will confirm they are certified dope.
Yeah.
All right. You can always get me on Twitter at Griffin Talks, where I'm usually posting quick impressions on weeklies and trades as I get them. All right. Until next time, make your past a future present.
Bye.